Recognizes the gentlelady from New York, Claudia Tenney.
Thank you, Chairman, and also thank you to the ranking member, and thank you to the witnesses for your really heartfelt testimony and your compassionate view of this really important issue. And it's long overdue that we update Title 4B in order to combat the many problems our nation's child welfare system faces today, and you've highlighted a lot of those. I really appreciate that. You know, reauthorizing this program will allow us to prevent future abuse and neglect, ultimately mitigating the substantial long-term abuse that you've all outlined today, and the costs of current child welfare programs. So I come from the state of New York, where there are over 25,000 children in foster care. Our child care system is plagued with all the problems this committee and all of you have outlined and aim to address in trying to fix this with this reauthorization. High costs, homelessness, challenges entering the workforce when they're completed foster care, and a lack of legal representation, which is something that really hits home to me. When I was a full-time practicing lawyer, I did a lot of pro bono work for the Legal Aid Society in upstate New York, and I worked with families for free on child custody, visitation, abuse and neglect, adoption cases. It is very complex. I had a district and in a region that was big cities or medium-sized cities, rural areas, suburban areas, and it was all the same issue coming up, and I really appreciate that. And I wanted to first ask Mr. Guillen, because I know this is what, I know it's a huge issue. The administration of the Children and Families Division within HHS has recently finalized a rule allowing states to use their Title IV funds to cover legal fees for children and parents involved in these child welfare cases. In response to this rule, I introduced H.R. 8810, the Ensuring Legal Representation for Child Welfare Act, which calls on the states to outline their approaches to providing legal representation and supporting families. The legislation aims to bolster state planning and encourage strategies that enhance family support. Could you tell us how legal representation for children and parents, typically those with legal representation tend to have better outcomes within the child welfare system, and compare those to without? And I know there are a lot of, I love the Legal Aid Society and our ability to give pro bono work, but sometimes it really just helps that we have people that are assigned to these cases.
So I appreciate you raising the issue of legal representation. In my opening remarks, I talked a little bit about the polarizing rhetoric that sometimes gets in the way of bipartisan solutions. And this is an area where I hear some folks talking about parents' rights and other people talking about children's rights, as if they are somehow in conflict. Yet people in the field know that both are required to move a case forward. And the earlier in the process that families are engaged with legal representation, the more likely it is that they're going to have successful outcomes and that the cases will move forward expeditiously.
Well, great. Thank you so much for that. And I wanted to say thank you to Mrs. Hilton for being so such a leader on this issue. And it was really a unique opportunity for me to see you and how well you've done. And albeit it was a Zoom call, but with your adorable son, you're just a loving mother. I have to say that this experience for you must have impacted you so greatly as you've described. But I want to say, you talked a little bit with my colleague about how the bill provides transparency, and you mentioned that Utah is providing some reforms. But what specifically do you think we could do to add mental health and counseling support, and how can we incorporate that in the bill? Along with trying to meet the goals that are already in this reauthorization.
Well, thank you. I enjoyed our Zoom call, and I love your jacket. The sparkles are amazing.
I had a little bling here for today.
Yes. I wanted to find out who made it later. But I think the most important thing is they need access to therapy, counseling, mentorship, and other community-based programs. And I think it's also important to not label these kids as troubled or bad. I think it makes these children feel like they aren't believed, and that's something that's important for them to not feel that way. And yeah, I think it's just about showing kindness and love and compassion and support and giving these kids life skills that they can use in life, because otherwise we're just setting them up to fail.
Did you have access to any of this therapy or anything when you were in your situation?
No, and I was only sent there because I was getting bad grades, I was just ditching classes. I have ADHD, and that was something that they weren't really just talking about back then. So somebody recommended that I go to these schools. My parents had no idea. They just thought it was going to be a normal boarding school. And when I got there was no therapy. We would just constantly be torn down, abused, screamed at, yelled at, no education whatsoever. I learned nothing there except trauma.
I think my time has run out, but I want to say thank you to you and everyone. You all were terrific. I wish I could have asked you all a question, but this is a great hearing, and I thank you, the chairman, and I yield back.
Thank you.
The chairman now recognizes